Hey there, math friends. This is Bill McDonald, the Common Sense Math Doctor. If I go like this, what that means in sports is timeout. The problem for teachers is that I'm hearing more and more, we need a timeout. There's just not enough time to do all of the things that we're asked to do in the time that we're given to do it. So what I've done in my math surgeries for 3rd through 8th grade, and I've done 3rd and 4th grade so far, is to make the questions for you that your students struggled with the most in both constructed and multiple choice formats, so that you won't have to reinvent the wheel or spend hours and hours making the test yourself. So instead of taking time out of your schedule with your families or your friends or your personal enjoyment, take a time in and take a look at this video where I show you how to do one of the problems that was difficult in the 3rd grade regarding fractions. In fractions, you have a dividing line in the middle, a numerator, and if you're gonna do the line block for karate, you go, numerator. You go say denominator, you have to go, denominator. Fraction part, fraction whole. So when you're looking at comparing inequalities of fractions, you can't just look at the numerator or the denominator. You have to look at the ratio of the numerator to the denominator, or the proportion, if you want to call it that in the upper grades, of how the numerator relates to the denominator, not just one or the other. So I'm going to get right into it, share the screen with you. This is the 3rd grade. What I've done is for both the last 2 testing years, I looked at the 10 most difficult questions from 2019 and the 13 most difficult 3rd grade questions from 2021. And for your convenience, I've gone ahead and placed the question number that I made my own question from, the percent the kids got on a question that was tested in that format, the reporting category, the student expectation, and even the readiness or supporting standard that it was being used by. So when you first see it, for you 3rd grade teachers, for some of you who might have be seeing me for the first time, I give you suggestions and strategies for both the 2019 and the 2021 test. Here it is for 2019. And then what you'll see is the 10 questions in the new constructed type response, where you can pick and choose for your kids. What kind of question do I want to give to them in multiple choice, and which ones could I choose where I could practice the new constructed type questions? So the one that I want to work on today is from 2021, and I'm going to do it both in the new constructed retype sponsor questions, and this one is going to be the equation editor format. The equation editor items allow the students to independently enter equations or inequalities. So I'm going to use that line as a fraction line if I need to. When you do it on the state test, they will probably have little boxes where the students can type in the numerator and the denominator. So let's look closely. This came from question number 26, a state average percent correct of 43. That means in May, that less than half of the 3rd graders in Texas knew how to compare fractions that were not equivalent. So we're going to do an inequality equation editor type question. So let's take a look at some of the clues they give us. The models, plural, shown are the same size and are divided into equal parts. The models are shaded to represent two fractions. Okay, let's take a look at the first one. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take a look. If we sit there and count carefully, let's work on the easy part first, the fraction whole. So I'm going to draw a line over here, and I'll go ahead and use regular color black here and here. So fraction whole, the denominator. How many parts are we looking at in this first picture? We spotlight for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 parts in total. So I'll place a 6 there in the denominator. Now, which parts of those 6 are shaded like it says in the problem there? Let's count that. 1, 2. 2 out of 3, 4, 5, 6. So I will type a 2 in the numerator. 2 out of 6. Okay. So 2 out of 6 is that first model. Let's look at the second model. Using the spotlighter, we'll count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once again, we have 6 parts in the denominator. So we will type a 6 there, just like we did. Fraction whole, 6 parts. How many are shaded? That's the simple part. So we'll look at the spotlight again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Numerator out of 5, 6. So right there, we would place a 4. So that means that 2, 6, if you look at it, and 4, 6 are not the same, because if you look at them, you can tell that that right model in the shaded portion takes up more. Now, one way to tell, if you have the same last name, if you think of the denominator as the last name, and the numerator only has 2, and the numerator for the other model has 4, well then 2, 6 is greater than 4, 6. So write an inequality statement that is true on the line below. The simplest form of this would be to say 2, write text there. This line 2. Why is it not typing this time? That's strange. Make sure that I have everything set right. 2 and 6 would be the denominator, 2, 6, okay? And you can do Pac-Man, or you can do the arrow. The arrow points to the smaller ones and opens up to the larger ones. So 2, 6, you can tell is smaller than 4, 6. So one way to do this is 2, 6, and I will use my computer and I will shift, because the greater than and less than, it's less than and greater than on the order from left to right on your computer. So I'm going to click that the 2, 6 fraction is less than what? Well, the other one was 4. Return here and see if it lets me. Make sure I have a number below there. 2, 6 is less than 4, 6, and that's one way. But as I take you to the multiple choice, they took it to one level higher, and that's where your students went wrong. That if they would have left it without reducing the fraction or showing groups, your kids would have done fine. But I'm going to clear the drawings and then take you over to page 42. Whoops, I got to switch to the mouse so I can do that. Page 42. And you'll see the problem now in multiple choice. And you see the 4, 6. So unfortunately, because of this portion right here, let me draw, okay? Green means good. So I'm gonna use a green to look at these 4 fractions. 4, 6 is the second fraction. We said that whatever is the case, that this first fraction has to be less than 4, 6. Well, the only choices that I think could be possible, it could be A, because I see less than there, that it's pointing to the smaller one and opening to the larger one. I see less than on B, but I see greater than on C and D. So in the process of elimination, you would decide, I think I need to delete those 2 because they've already used the wrong symbol. So we know that it's going to be 1/3. Let's find out why. If you take the fractions and you say, okay, what does this 1/3 mean? It means take one thing, this whole piece here, and divide it into 3 parts. And we try that. Let's draw a wall. Let's do that. And I'll use red this time. There's 1 out of 3 parts. There's 2 out of 3. And there's 3 out of 3. So if you take by groups, there's 1 group, 2 groups, and 3 groups. So if I look at groups, our new fraction is 1/3. And let's see the other one. There's 1 group there. Let me show you. This is 1 group only. And this is 2 groups. And that would have been 2 out of 3. But when you understand the concept of equivalent fractions, you would understand that 2 out of 3 is the same as 4 out of 6 because you're looking at the groups in comparison to the individual pieces. So we think that this one is correct for the less than because 1/3. But if you look at this part, 1 is smaller than 4. Well, I didn't even know where the 1 is 1 part, but the 4 is these 4 pieces, what represents 2/3 of that second model. When you only compare, and I said that at the beginning of the video, if you only compare the numerator or the denominator, you're going to get the wrong answer. So we're going to eliminate this letter because of this part right here. And so if you want to prove your answer, this does not make it true. When you're looking at fractions, it has to be part to whole. So let's take a look at this other choice. 1 out of 3 is less than 4 out of 6, which is what we said. One group out of the 3 groups that we divided them into is less than 4 shaded out of 6 total, because 1 out of 3 parts, 1, 2, 1 part out of 1, 2, 3 parts is less than 4 out of 6 parts. That part is true. So we should prove our answer. We should explain, oh, that part is true, and less than is true, and 4 out of 6 parts. So there's nothing but check marks there. So the other way that you could do, if you are teaching cross multiplication, which some of you frown upon that, you take your denominator on one side and multiply it by the numerator. 6 times 1 is 6 over here. You place it above. And 3 times 4 is 12. Well, 6 is less than 12. That's true. But here's the problem. 6 times 1 is 6. Times 3 times 4 is 12. So when you cross multiply here, it's still not going to work because of the second part, which was not true. Every time that you're comparing fractions that have inequalities, you've got to check part to whole on both fractions, not just the numerator or just the denominator or some random number like they were trying to do in letter A. So the answer that we're going to choose, I'm going to make this very tiny. Letter B. And then what you can do to help your kids practice bubbling is, let's pretend like, if you're doing paper still, let's pretend like this is the actual bubble on the test. I'm trying my best to build that in. Let me try that. A little bit more. Trying to get more of this blue here filled in. So you would fill it in completely as much as you can. And then what you could do, the last thing you might do is teach your kids on the paper form, since they're limiting how much annotation you can do on the test. Perhaps, I'm hoping what's going to happen is that they're going to make it so that as your students complete each problem, they can clear their drawings, and that as you're walking around observing, you can see that they are doing their strategies. So the 19B that you choose in the book will match the 19B that you choose in your Scantron. So I would probably suggest you have them circle that if they're allowed to. You know, for sure you can do that this year if you're doing paper form. That way the 19B, you always remember that odd can only be A, B, C, D, and even can only be F, G, H, D on paper tests. On Scantron tests, it's still up in the air about if they're going to use nothing but A, B, C, D for all of the answers, because supposedly it's going to be easier to pick the correct answer. Uh, and that will hopefully only allow one answer per number, one letter to be picked per number. So that's why so many kids struggled. You have to make sure they understand that when you're looking at fractions, it has to be part to whole with the number of shaded versus the total on the denominator, and the number of groups shaded. One group is shaded, 3 groups total, not 1/2, because some kids are going to pay attention. Oh, 1 is the numerator and 2 is they don't know. It's always going to be part to whole. 1 group is shaded. There are 3 groups altogether. That's why letter B would be correct. So be careful with that. 2 groups are shaded, 3 groups are altogether. So that's the fraction. That's the ratio. 1 out of every 3 here, 4 out of every 6 here. That's the proportion. 2 out of 2 out of every 6, or 4 out of every 6. And so the reason that the kids struggled is because they did not realize that even though the first part of the inequality was true, the reasoning behind the truth was not true, because you can't just look at one side of a fraction to determine let me go back to the analogy. If the father's last name is 6 over here, and the father's last name is 3 over here, you've got to compare the child 1 out of 3 to 2 out of 3, or 4 out of 6, depending on how you're going to look at this other set. And they were looking at 4, 6, so you'd kind of have to look at it the same way they do. Number shaded, 4 divided by 6 denominator. And just so you know, just some TMI, not a too much information idea, but a teachable moment of instruction. When you start trying to divide fractions in the upper grades and turn them to decimals, you're going to take the dividend 4 and divide it by 6 to find out the percent. Fraction to decimal, you would divide the numerator dividend 4, divisor 6. Dividend goes inside the box, 4 would go outside the box for you upper grades, and then you would get a decimal, and then you would be able to show them how to move a decimal to a percent by sliding the decimals 2 points. And we'll talk about that in another video. But our main point here was make sure your kids understand that when they're looking at fractions, they have to look at parts to wholes, not just one part or the other. Clear my drawings. Thank you so much. I hope that all of those of you who purchased the 3rd and or 4th grade are getting some good practice in. I'll be modeling all of the videos. I'll also be making the 5th, 6th, 7th, and possibly the 8th. The only thing I don't like about 8th, I'm going to be very honest with you, 8 eighth grade allows the students to use calculators, and too early in the game, the eighth grade teachers are allowing students to use calculators and not do paper and pencil work. And this is a corny little saying, but if you use too many calculators now, you're going to get caca later. And so I want to, as much as possible, show you how to do the difficult eighth grade problems when we get there using paper and pencil before we have to rely on the step-by-step calculation entries, that the buttons that will push and the order that will be pushing them. So goodbye. God bless. Share this video with your friends who are struggling with inequalities regarding fractions, parts to wholes. God bless and have a great day.